Well, good morning, everyone. Good morning, and welcome to another episode of the Buddhist Biohacker. My name is Lisa Gunshore, and I am your host. And for everybody who's joining in the live stream, you are welcome to use the chat box to your right to ask questions of our guests today, share your comments and stories as we move through the conversation. We love hearing from you guys, so please do that. And if you are joining on audio on iHeartRadio, Spotify, Google, Podbean, any of those places, you can join us in the conversation on MeWe.com at Buddhist Biohacker Forum. And I see lots of you guys ticking in already. Welcome to the live. And it is Wednesday already, August 12th, and I'm so happy and honored to have our guest with us today. He is in our upcoming documentary, Awaken Grace, sharing his stories of awakening, and he is coming live with us from across the pond. Welcome, David Behrens. Welcome to the program.
Thank you. Thank you so much for inviting me. And it's very exciting to be here. I'll be with you and, of course, with everyone who has tuned in and connected.
Yeah, I was really thrilled to have you on today, David. You have such an incredible energy. Every time I talk to you, I feel like I'm just kind of swimming in this ocean of compassion. So it's just really lovely for me. So it's a great way to start my day over here in Colorado. And you have such an incredible background. And so I wanted to give you space just to start out with, just to share with everyone a little bit about who you are and what you do and some of your background, and then we'll go from there.
So I always keep it, I'm a storyteller, so I'll keep it to a nice, I would say I began, as sometimes we look at it as when did the journey sort of take root? And I guess I felt it was very much when I was young, 17 or 18. I was always interested in the Eastern traditions. Sometimes I tell the funny story. I remember seeing my sister at 15 or 16 I was, and she got a book from a library. This was in New York. And I don't know where she got it, but she was maybe doing some poses, hatha yoga poses. And it was so strange in our household. And I peeking in, and she closed the door. And then I got the book, and there was a series called Funk and Wagnall. I mean, this is a long time ago. Believe it or not, we're talking now the early 70s.
Oh, wow.
So, so that led me into, getting involved in college in New York. It was Brooklyn College. I took a hatha yoga training there. We actually took a 3-credit course.
Oh, wow.
And that was at that time, and it was all different spiritual teachers were coming. This was the 70s. And in the particular awakening video, I tell about my first awakening experience of this great explosion of light. And it was all questioning, is there this higher consciousness? Is there God? And maybe it was seeking out of a sort of an internal fear, but out of that was, wow, there is something greater. And that led me into meeting a great master who was coming from the East. And before I knew it, I found my way in India. And soon I became a monk of an Eastern order. I lived as a monk, if we take the story, for almost from 1980 till 2007, 27 years. And being a monk was a very focused journey of practice and study and a lot of travel and meeting people. It was a very international organization and absorbing the great teachings of the masters. And then I transitioned, which is always, it's not always done. Many people, once you're a monk, you leave your body as a monk. But one thing I always learned in the tradition I was in, and also in my own way, was always reflecting that whatever one does, it's true. Whatever one does has to be for a lot of self-development and growth. So I felt it was time to transition. And then I became a householder. I'm still married. And then the story goes, in the last 13 years, I've been living in England with my wife, and maybe soon to be in Germany, but international with London too. It was taken, how do I take my journey so it's a continuation, all my skills and what I've learned Also, then I studied to become a homeopath, which was alternative medicine. And then I always cared about people, taking care of them, and learning about health and illness, especially holistic health, where everything is taken care of, and self-development. So in the last, I could say 6 years especially, there's been so many opportunities uh, for myself to express my work, which is taking care of people to develop, you can say, their mental and emotional health. And then now we use the term mindfulness. And of course, when I studied as a monk, I didn't even use that word at that time. It almost didn't exist. We just studied, you can say, the source Eastern scriptures. And of course, I did study a certain amount of Buddhism and the great masters, Tibetan Buddhism, the mystics in Christianity. But then how does that sort of match and fit within to this sort of world of functional medicine and medicine? So I had to learn how to bridge that gap. So a lot of clients are offered to me from the doctor, from the psychotherapist, from the psychologist, or from the sort of HR in different corporations. So I had to be able to bridge that. And but I still see it through the deep mystical part. So it's always both. That deeper part I see, but it always has to be retranslated so a person can hear it and be inspired to take up these practices.
So beautiful. What made you want to learn about homeopathy? I'm curious, like what led you there?
Yeah, homeopathy, while I was in India, I was very lucky. All different masters actually came to where I was living, and they wanted to learn meditation, and they wanted to study the Eastern philosophies. And some of them were the greatest Ayurvedic physicians of the time. I mean, literally the top scholars, because they knew they could learn that where I was. And there was a time I got ill living in India. I lived in India for 20 years in the intense heat. And yeah, it could be a challenge, especially for a Westerner.
Yeah.
Okay, and when I got ill, I was taking support of this one Ayurvedic doctor, but for one reason, he went off and he gave one of his lower associates to take care of me, and they didn't do a good job. So I was a little bit upset with that. And I was seeking, oh boy, what do I do now? I would like to get healthy. I was ill. And I met a homeopath, a family I knew recommended, and it was so quick. It was this very sort of eccentric homeopath. A woman who says, I will make you better. I will make you better. And she pour down these homeopathic remedies, and things that took a long time were happening really quickly. And I went, this is an amazing form of alternative medicine. So when I transitioned from being a monk, there was blessings to, okay, study that and learn that. And I found it is an amazing form of alternative medicine because it goes to the deeper circle of illness. Many of us, when we're ill, it could be a major cancer, it could be eczema, it could be mental health, it could be addiction, it could be just too much stress, and you feel it could be any illness. We can ask ourselves, okay, what are the different circles of that illness? And homeopathy is how you see it. There's the outer circle that has a name called eczema, say, or diabetes. Okay, it has certain common symptoms. Everybody has that. But what is that unique circle inside, which is sort of the imbalance? And of course, in different traditions, you approach it differently. Like in acupuncture or in Ayurveda, you do it with the doshas and taking the pulse. But what is that deep inner circle? In homeopathy, you always want to try to go to that deep disturbance where your vital force is imbalanced. So you do actually an over 2-hour consultation and ask many different questions. And then you have to decipher that and find it within 4,000 different homeopathic remedies.
Oh, wow.
And I did find out in the channel we're in, when you're ill, it's always interesting. what is that deep inner experience? Because everybody experiences differently. So in homeopathy, you focus on what is your experience. Now, of course, and you keep asking that and asking that until a person describes their actual vital force, their life force disturbance. They can actually express it because you ask enough questions. And when they express it, you sometimes wonder, they're expressing it in such an interesting way, it doesn't make sense anymore because it's so hard to put words into that deep. And then it becomes almost extremely deep because it's like this deep inner balance almost in the evolution of your soul. It goes into like shamanism almost, even though they keep it very medical. And then it's almost like you have an imbalance inside. And just like in shamanism, you have to go very deep into what is that's causing that illness. And of course, it's within. And then in homeopathy, you match it to a particular substance that has that same effect with, like, example is homeopathy was created 250 years ago by Hanuman, and he was a particular chemist, a doctor. He lived in Germany. It was a time when medicine was, very strange. So 200 years ago, they were using pure mercury. They were using even bloodletting. So he had to find something else, and he realized that every single substance, it's almost like ancient herbology, has an effect on us. But if you could remove the toxology of that, just like right now you have, they're using, when right now they're trying to find that the perfect thing for the disease now, the vaccine. And what is a vaccine? You're finding something which is like a little bit of the disease that helps you into turning on, you can say, your immune system. So homeopathy takes that in its deepest ancient sense, because they found that every single substance causes a particular symptoms. So you find the substance that can cause those symptoms in a healthy person, which then, without the toxology, because homeopathic medicine is made from a substance, but it's become highly diluted. It's no longer the original substance. It's mixed in water, it's shook, and it's diluted again and again and again until it's like the imprint of that substance. And then what happens is, it's very amazing. It can literally sort of shift that imbalance inside. And I saw it happen to me. And then when I became a homeopath, I saw some amazing things happen for people, but of course, it's like the problem with homeopathy, you have to be good. You have to ask a lot of questions. And even the questions are very therapeutic, because all of a sudden you get almost in the witness state of this deep pattern inside, which is the deeper experience of your illness or imbalance. And then eventually the homeopath has to decipher that and find the remedy. And now there's been a lot of studies, like India now has the greatest homeopaths in the world.
Oh, wow.
They've created all these sort of schematics so that you can study it and put it in a computer, and at the same time match it to know what substance it is, what kingdom, whether it's a plant, an animal, or a mineral. And but what's very amazing is it does work. But you have to, it's like a combination lock. You got to get the combination right. If you get it wrong, it's okay, because nothing happens much, because there's very little toxology in the substance. But if you get it right, it will shift this inner energetic balance. And that's when it helps you on all levels. If you got the remedy right, is that the chief complaint, whatever that was, the person had, begins to shift. And also how they sleep, their digestion, how they manage stress, all those types of things. And another very interesting thing happens, and maybe this is in Ayurveda too, because you've studied Ayurveda and you practice that. Your past illnesses begin to unravel that you have not gotten rid of. you push them deeper, maybe through allopathic medicine, because now so many young children are getting asthma, and so many young children are getting different, you can say, internal problems. And if you trace how they were treated, sometimes it was the illness that they originally had disturbance was pushed deeper. Sometimes it's first on the skin. If you don't really heal it deep within, you've pushed it further, then it goes to the lungs. And then if you still treat it with intense allopathic, okay, it's good, it serves a purpose. But sometimes you're pushing it deeper, and then it becomes a mental, emotional disturbance, which can affect every aspect of your life. So in homeopathy, you're also taught to trace how a person has been treated through their life, and to sense if their own illness was even pushed deeper at a younger age. So I found it's amazing. My wife is sort of the expert now. She's now a teacher of homeopathy, and I have to say I don't practice as much as before, because my passion has always been meditation, and going sort of to the focusing on how do we evolve and transform that. But I would say of all the alternative medicines, it's right up on the top, but you got to practice it well. So that's sort of a quickie on it.
Yeah, I love what you brought up. So yes, in my Ayurveda practice, and really just in my own intuitive discoveries with myself, it is that those layers where it's like it started here and then it got deeper and deeper and deeper. And even in my own direct experience, I had a lot of anxiety as a child, and that anxiety got deeper and deeper and deeper until I was having, neurological symptoms, and it was getting to the root of that to be able to heal it. And I was able to heal it. I mean, it's actually amazing. I don't have any of those symptoms now, which is beautiful and amazing. And it's all about getting to the root. So I love that you brought that up, because it's very much, it's almost to me the only way to heal, honestly, is to get, to go down however deep it's gotten, wherever the imbalance has gone to, so for me, and for those of you who are Ayurveda nerds, my vata went into my prana, like it went all the way into that space where, it was impacting my life force energy. And so it's a really interesting, like what you're bringing up is really cool. And I have two questions for you. One of them is, I'm curious, when you are working with homeopathy, if you used your own meditation and intuitive practices to kind of discover what you thought was the right balance. And then after that question, I want to ask about mindfulness, but I'm just curious, like if you ever use those tools.
The most important thing when you're taking a consultation and asking questions is that the one who's asking has to go into an intuitive, completely non-judgmental stance. And then you journey with the client and you ask questions, you help them go to, if possible. And in homeopathy, they actually talk about it, it's called the sensation now. It's only in the last 10 years they use this term, of the energetic disturbance on the prana level. You take the client with questions until they can express it in some form of words, and sometimes you have them draw, and they actually express the imbalance within in the form of words, but in the form of a description. So of course you have to be quiet, because they'll say something and you think you're onto a remedy, but you have to still realize, maybe I have to go deeper. And the only way is if you're in that state where the mind is quiet, but aware and present. And it's almost like witness consciousness. And what's very interesting, sometimes the client goes into a state of pure witness consciousness, and they see that disturbance within from that level of non-judgment. And sometimes all their symptoms disappear for a certain amount of time.
Oh, wow.
But the problem is they can't hold it because they go back. So of course you have to take the help of the homeopathic remedy that moves that disturbance and begin to kind of go through the different layers of your vital force, sort of getting healthier, and whether it's the doshas. And even in acupuncture, when it's studied in a very deep level, they will say the same things. All these ancient medicines understood that.
Mhm.
They understood to go to the deep prana level. I guess the uniqueness of homeopathy is they use a substance, and that is taking the same substance that would create that disturbance, which is actually one of the first teachings of Hippocrates, where he says, like cures like. He was the first doctor of medicine without being MDs, meaning you take the same substance that causes the illness to cure the illness. But in homeopathy, you remove the toxology of it by making it highly diluted. So it's very mysterious, but it's also almost makes logical sense, because now vaccines are doing that. But the problem with vaccines now is they have a lot of toxology in them. So
Mm.
you have to weigh, is the toxology worse than the actual cure? While
Yes.
in homeopathy, it's very subtle. There's no toxology. But if you don't get it quite right, you say, what did you give me? A bunch of uh, a sugar pill? But
Yeah.
if you get it right, you are touching almost the imprint, the actual imprint of the disturbance within.
Oh,
And it
that's
will
cool.
begin to shift. And, but I wanted to bring up something when we go into mindfulness. I think the reason why I went there is that becoming healed, if we take it deeper, what does that really mean? I think in the work you offer and in what you offer to so many people and in your channel, it's a bigger picture view of what is true health and what is true healing.
Mhm.
And true healing cannot be just the physical healing. It has to be on this deeper level. And sometimes the healing won't be about that. It might not be about the physical healing. It's kind of the evolution of your soul. So just like we all will die one day,
Mhm.
and we all will die of some illness of sorts, or the organ will stop working.
Mhm.
So what is healing on the highest level? And that's where I've always embraced my understanding of deeper spirituality and what I've learned from the great masters. It's becoming one with consciousness. It's one with God, and it's this greater sort of growth in healing. So I felt that was more my calling. Homeopathy or Ayurveda taught in a great way, or acupuncture, it will make the load you're carrying lighter. But the real healing, the deeper healing, is the soul evolving and on its journey. And it might not be physical. And if you study and you work with 1,000 people who are ill in your life, or 10,000 or 100,000, you find that out. Or you just study and look in the world. It's not, or study about, it's not about just physical.
Mhm.
Even though we want the physical, like you shared, you don't have those symptoms, so you can do your work. And homeopathy has a very beautiful thing. It says that healing is about, you're able to fulfill your full potential and your God-given destiny. So you become the instrument that you were born to be, and you're a vehicle of that. And I believe that's the true healing. And whether it's with a little bit of an illness or a major illness, it won't really matter, because you are really healed.
Yeah. Oh, that's so beautifully said, because it's so true. I mean, I I healed myself through the spiritual practices. I wrote a book about it. It's right behind me here. And it's exactly what you're saying. And I'm called in the same way that you are, in that if you don't look at the energetic or emotional space, then you run the risk of those symptoms coming right back. I mean, that's the truth of it. And even, with energy healing, it can have profound effects, but the most profound energy work you can do is the work you do on yourself. Because when you look at it and you see it and you shine light on where the issue is or the root cause, it becomes the answer, and it clears all of that away. It's like the most incredible gift you can give yourself is to heal in that way. And so I'm right there with you. And when we talk about mindfulness, one of the things that I did that started my whole journey, I mean, really my whole journey started in 2003-ish. And I weighed 250 pounds and I was not happy with that. And at the time I was like 25 years old and I didn't want to look that way. I didn't want to feel that way. And I started with a mindfulness practice, which is what I'm so excited to talk to you about. And I started with a practice that's now in my book called Mindfulness of the Body. But what I did was I literally put my hands on my weight and I asked it what it had to say to me and really sat with myself. And I was shocked at what came up for me in those meditations over that year. And it completely changed my entire life. I mean, the 100 pounds I've lost was through energy. It had nothing to do with diet. The diet came because of the energy. I mean, that's what happens is you start to purify yourself and you start to see consciously what you're doing to yourself and the decisions and the choices that you're making. And so I really want to talk to you about how you incorporate mindfulness into the work you do now with your patients and, your own life, because it is like the key to the lock, I think.
Yeah. And if the way you described it, what I found is, okay, we have two principles I found and it's the same. Mindfulness is building the ability to have the hands of the reins on one sort of mind and being aware and present, and then learning the skill to guide it in the direction you want it to go. So what you shared in a sense was becoming present and aware of yourself and then guiding that in the direction. And of course, you were guiding it eventually, what I hear, to that deeper source of energy within, the light, the energy, and then that reveals the greater truth to then follow and guide yourself. So we have these two principles: being present, being aware, hands of reins on the mind, and guiding it in a particular direction. And I found that that's what many people have lost. They've lost the ability to be present. They've lost the ability to be aware of what's happening. They're on automatic pilot. And then what happens is they lose the ability to guide the mind. I've been very lucky in the last several years. I also work in the National Health Service. And if we look at people who are very unwell in mental health, it's almost like a graph. If you just take two principles, being aware and present, and the next principle to guide the mind. When you're very unhealthy in the mind, you're hardly aware. When I work with people, some of them have even been sectioned, where it means that they had to be, put in a hospital for a while until they got well. And I work with them in their recovery phase. It's building back their ability to be present, aware, and to guide their mind. So I found that the simple practices we learn about mindfulness now with the different apps and all that, the only thing is that when you teach people who are not so healthy, you have two big jobs to do, because in mindfulness is not just taking a pill. You have to practice. You have to practice being aware. You have to practice being present. And then you have to practice guiding your mind and eventually to that source of energy within, of life force. So that's why very often it's focused on the breath. And another thing I learned, which soon maybe there'll be a book at the right time, is when I work with people and they have challenges in their emotions, this is an interesting reflection. Every single emotion we have, everyone, the emotion is expressed in three ways, and that's how we work with it. You can say clinically and therapeutically. When there's an imbalance of a particular emotion, you have first all the thoughts that go with it. That's one whole part that gets worked with. There's the somatic body experience, and then there's the breath pattern. Example is, if you take depression and the opposite, happiness, joy, enthusiasm, our mind calls this depression one thing and that enthusiasm and happiness based upon our thoughts, our somatic body experience of it, and our breath pattern of it. So when I work in mindfulness, I work on these three areas: strengthening your relationship to your thoughts, eventually freeing this sort of deep somatic experience. Because when you feel so unwell in your mind and emotions, what is the problem with it? The problem is that either you're so caught in the thoughts that are being produced, or it's so uncomfortable in the body, the somatic experience of it, the pain of it, or the discomfort of it, whether it's fear or sadness or jealousy or anger. And the reality is your breath pattern has changed. So a very beautiful practice one can do, if ever you want to understand this, is say we just take the breath pattern. I mean, that now there's so many people learning that if they work with the breath, you can eventually heal a person just by working with the breath, because the breath becomes sort of the link to the energy within, but it also shows you your imbalance. Example is when you're very, say, depressed, or you have even a little clinical depression, you can ask yourself, how am I breathing? And I guarantee right now what I've been doing, and more and more and more, I just ask them, count how many in-breaths and out-breaths you have when you're not doing well. And there will always be an imbalance in that breath pattern. And it almost becomes this amazing diagnostic tool. If you can create eventually, now they're using all different combinations of how much you breathe in and how much you breathe out. It's from the ancient yoga system, which is thousands of years old, pranayama. But if we take the deeper principle, it's about the breath flowing freely in and freely out. And then if you take it even deeper, the breath also takes you to the deep pranic place where all breath takes place, your life energy. So you have to know how to work on it on a very sort of outer level, very simple level. And then eventually you can help a person to go to that deeper energy source of the breath. And I found I use those two principles in mindfulness: training someone to be present and mindful, and then helping them to train and build the muscle of guiding the mind. And you could also match this, which I found, which I had to learn, to 4 functions of the brain. So what I love that all of a sudden, I didn't learn it as a monk, but I had to learn it now. What is the medical and science on all this? Because some people need to hear that, or they're not inspired to practice.
Yeah.
And also, if you're offered a client, myself, from a doctor or a psychiatrist or a psychotherapist, I have to also know the work they're doing so that I'm supporting what's already being done. I feel I'm the one who will help you to learn the skills to become more empowered, and also to build that healing energy. And at the same time, I've also understand the therapeutic journey and sort of what's happening on a deeper level and an outer level. So you have to kind of work on all of that to help a person.
Yeah.
Maybe that's why on one hand you do deep energy work, but at the same time you learned Ayurveda, so we have to approach all that. But more than anything, it's the person learning. I always say this: to become their own best therapist, become their own best doctor, become their own best friend, become their own best parent. If they want to take care of their children, they have to first parent themselves. So again, it becomes, this inner journey of self-empowerment and inner healing. And I guess all the years and the different practice, I sometimes, I can play a role of helping to navigate all of that, see the bigger picture. But the truth is, we have to take up the the mantle, or whatever we say it. It's our own effort.
Oh, I love that. Do you have a favorite healing story?
With a client? Oh boy.
Yeah, I'm just curious.
Okay, I have one. I'll give one story, which I always found was amazing when I was working in the National Health Service. I had clients who were very unwell mentally. You know, some had just been sectioned, some even came with support workers because they could not be alone. So there I am teaching. Okay, this is now 6 years ago. And I saw the power of just being present and aware and guiding the mind in that. So one particular client came with a severe psychosis where you hear voices. And
Yeah.
sometimes you wonder, what are voices? You hear them. It's almost that your mind has thoughts, and if you become very unwell, your thoughts take up different personalities. And you're so unwell that you don't know which one is which, and you don't know your own voice. So you think you have all these multiple personalities. And it's a dreadful mental health illness. So how can mindfulness help such a person? You would wonder.
Hmm.
So I'm teaching in a class, and I had to be very careful because that's, if you teach in that field, I also been given workshops lately on how to be with those in addiction and mental health, if you're a teacher of mindfulness or hatha yoga, because your words are very powerful. The word becomes reality. So I was doing the famous mountain pose with clients. This is 6 years ago, where you stand tall, and I said, your feet are connected to the earth, mountain pose. And he immediately felt he was on top of a mountain and started screaming. His world became a mountain. That was the shape of his mind.
Mm.
On one hand, it could be humorous. On the other hand, it was hell for him. Big
Yeah.
time. Okay, how can mindfulness help that person? So eventually training him to become aware of where the mind goes, even a little bit, and guiding it back to the breath. He was able to do that a little. On the fourth session, 4 2-hour sessions, I do 1 month at the National Health Service. Everybody drew a drawing to say how mindfulness has helped them. He drew the drawing almost similar to the image you have behind you of the eye.
Oh, wow.
But he did it in a particular way because the eye represents, he had arrows going in and arrows going out, a big eye. So you might guess, I said, oh, that's interesting. And he was talking, he was well enough to present. How did mindfulness help you with your psychosis? And guess what he said? He said, now I can hear the voices, but I don't have to let them in.
Wow.
And he says, yeah, I want to continue to practice. I can't do it all the time. So he actually built back the brain function. There's a third part of the brain known as healthy perspective, where if you have a thought, you know it's just a thought. So he was able to create that healthy separation between himself, the one who observes,
Mhm.
and the talking part of the mind.
Wow.
And he also gained back, it's called executive functioning of the brain, which you need in addiction, especially, where you can begin to guide it and make choice. So he would hear the voices and he can decide, I'm not letting them in. You
That's
can't
so cool.
stop them. That's too big of a job. But you can decide to let them in if you gain back these healthy brain functions. And I went, that's amazing. He must have been in therapy and medication and just got out of, a major sectioning in the hospital. And he said that after 1 month.
That is incredible. I love that story. That's
I have
amazing.
several stories like that yeah, but like everything, it has to be practiced and kept up. And I remember working with one client who had major addiction, 10, 12 years, very wealthy man, had never had to work, which didn't help him. And he went through relapse 10 years in a row and did all that. And finally, he gained the ability through meditation and mindfulness to be able to quiet his mind just a drop and touch a moment of peace finally. He also was able to be with his pain emotionally instead of run away from it. He developed that ability. And as a result, he no longer needed the drug of his choice to deaden the emotional suffering he felt inside. And as a result, it was interesting, his wish at the end of the whole thing, he said, yeah, I'm going to become a mindfulness teacher. So He's a very wealthy man, so he now did a major training, and he lives in a part of England, and he's helping all these organizations with, because it helped him. He rebuilt back his brain functions.
That's
So,
incredible.
and a lot of my work is helping clients. And then I'll add one more thing. The healing takes another very great level. If you study the 12-step program, that's like the #1 program still to this day of 40, 50 years, different forms of it throughout the world. It's all based upon the spiritual awakening. The 12-step program, it's the final step. The final step is the awakening and connecting to that each day with honesty about one's life. And I found if you speak to 100 people who've been in addiction, or 500, and you ask them if they're able to stay now sober, and whether it's any type of addiction, from behavioral to drugs, to sex, to gambling, and the whole 9 yards, they all will talk about that awakening on some sort and connecting to it each day. And only then does recovery last. So it was very beautiful for me. I realized that my whole world of studying as a monk was about the awakening and the unfoldment. And then it continued now with my last 13 years of realizing, wow, these same principles, which are in the ancient Eastern philosophies, and somewhere in the West too, are the same principles now in recovery, are the same principles in even holistic health management, like functional medicine. So I found beautiful connections and bridges. And, we have to learn how to work with all of them. And the awakening has been very interesting, because that same client did experience an awakening, and he could feel that energy moving in his body. And it became so strong that it was stronger than even that pain that was pulling him to the drug, which was pushing the pain away. And it was so interesting. And it was a combination of mindfulness, a combination of his awakening of his spiritual energy. But of course, it was his effort. He took it up, but it needed a lot of inspiration. It needed a lot of good stories. So he stayed present. I'm sure you're also a good storyteller, because all these things require effort. There's a very beautiful quote in the Sanskrit language which says that right effort is grace.
Oh my God, I'm writing that down. I love that.
But it's a particular philosophy where that comes from. Right effort is grace. And we have to learn and I believe that's the effort that connects you to where grace exists within you. And then we have the big question, what is grace? And I've understood grace, and I've seen it now in working in the medical field, addiction field, and recovery and health. Grace is sort of that power where you connect to your life force, and it helps you and leads you to this unfolding of wholeness and oneness and expansion and more freedom. So grace is that power, and it's important to connect to that. And we have grace within us, and the great masters are those who are embodiments of grace. They become one with that. So, but again, our journey is to have that happen within us. And we have to all do it in different ways. And I had to learn how to change my language. If I'm working with someone who doesn't even want to hear the word spirituality or God, has to be very scientific. And then I'm working with someone of the Muslim faith, and I have to speak in that language. And I've studied those traditions. So I found that was very helpful, that I can say as a monk, we used to go regularly to the mosques of the great Muslim mystics. So yeah, I had to learn. And in Christianity, I visited a lot of the very amazing ancient monasteries. And I was born Jewish, and I went to the birthplace of the Kabbalah. So I had to, I guess it was my good fortune, at least learn a certain depth in it all, and then apply that when I'm working with a client so I can feel I understand what where you are, and I can maybe help you, inspire you to go with the right effort.
Mm. God, that's so beautiful. My gosh. And we have a comment from the audience just saying it's so inspiring. And it really is, David. I mean, it's just so, the way you articulate it is so beautiful. It's just, oh gosh. And it's a great segue because, you know, you're in Awakened Grace, the documentary that I've been working on, I feel like forever, even though it's been a really short time, really in the last few months. But you had said something before we went live about, you know, awakenings and the Sanskrit meaning behind them. And, you know, you're talking about awakening now. And I think, you know, what do you want to say about awakenings? You know, what is that meaning for you? And, you know, the tie to the Sanskrit meaning, and just, I'm just curious what you want to say about that.
Awakening is the unfoldment of your life force. Awakening is the unfoldment of the source of grace within you. You know, awakening is, yeah, it's connecting to your essence and then having it unfold and becoming more whole and becoming more free. And awakening is the beginning. And it will be different for each person. And there's different steps we can all do. One is just, yeah, we pursue and we get guided from within. A lot of it is, it's an inner journey, for sure. We might do something on the outside, but the awakening is on the inside. So it's available to every single person. You know, it's cross-cultural. And a very beautiful thing is to just study all the great mystics from all the different traditions and what was their awakening like. And you see that they all use the same language. They all use the same imagery, and they all will share the same experience on different levels. And they'll speak about light. They'll speak about energy. You know, they'll speak about unfolding. They'll speak about expansion. They'll speak about freedom. But again, with awakening, the next very important step is unfolding. And that's the continual journey after the awakening. Of course, awakening, you know, when there's a true powerful awakening, it continues to carry you. But like everything, you have to keep feeding it. You have to keep connecting to it. And that's why I found, even in the 12-step program, I went, oh, wow, this is what I learned as a monk from the ancient Eastern. Everyone's connecting. So I focus a lot on how everything's so connected. And same with awakening.
Yeah. I'm like, what do I want to say about that? Because just you talking about awakenings, like the Shakti coming from you, even talking about it is like, I can feel it. I'm sure everybody who's watching, you guys can feel it too. I mean, it's just so powerful. And there's so many different ways to awaken, and there's so many different awakenings. And I think we've had a ton this year as a community and as a collective. And what do you want to say about this time of awakening? Like, what are your thoughts today with all that you've learned and everything you've experienced? And here we are in this, you know, collective ascension in a way. You know, what are your thoughts on the awakening now, and your advice to everyone who is awakening to their own truths?
I mean, advice is focus on making it more true for oneself. And it's a daily practice of honoring that awakened energy, connecting to that awakened energy within oneself, valuing it, also valuing where you received it from, if you received it from a great master, because the masters, certain masters are one with that awakening. So we continue to honor that. And again, it's taking it within oneself and becoming one with it. But that's a lifetime journey. Now, when I work with a client, I might do 4 sessions, 8 sessions, and then once a month and know them for years. I said, I'm sorry to say this, but this is a lifetime practice. Why not? We're living life, so we might as well live life in the best way. And the best way is to connect to that and connect to the right effort.
Mm.
And the right effort is the effort that the grace flows within you. And there's no one way, there's several ways. And you have to intuitively find it or be blessed that it comes to you. And then, keep feeding it, taking care of it, honoring it, respecting it. And then, but this is a time where, I don't know how, we are in a unique time,
To say the least.
Yeah, I mean, where we're seeing things we never dreamed of. It's how, I'll tell you one interesting story. When I was a monk, we had a library there. It had all the great ancient books. And I read one book of this amazing master from India. And supposedly he lived to like 160. And they show pictures, 100, 110, 120. His beard got longer. I think his name was Shiva. I forgot the exact name. Maybe a Shiva Puri Baba. Anyway, he lived in the high Himalayas. And he spoke, this was 1970s when I read it, that there will be a time, he said soon, when everywhere, he said, there will be disturbances. Everywhere. Everywhere. And at that time, in 1974, nobody thought about everywhere. We were in India. We didn't have internet. If we talked to someone in this little village, we had to do it over this funny machine that would ticker type, and you never got a phone call through. This is only 40 years ago. So now we have everywhere. And he says it will be everywhere. And then he said, you will only survive with one thing. And he said, you only survive, he said, with discipline. Mm. And then you might think, well, what does that mean? And of course, you have to study the ancient traditions of the great masters. Discipline is the discipline of your senses and using them for the unfoldment.
Yeah.
It's not just how much you eat or it's all the senses, but it's turning them inwards for the unfoldment. And then you will survive. But then the question is, survive, what did he mean by that? And I felt it's not that everyone's going to die. It's about thriving. So the question is, even during this time, how can you thrive? And I believe you can thrive if you focus on the principle of the awakening, the principle of the unfoldment, and honoring that within you. And then that is a path of inner discipline. And it's a path of where mindfulness is. You're aware of where your mind goes and you guide it. And that is with your senses. So it's all of that. And then you do survive, you do thrive. And even if you suffer with health, you still thrive. Because thriving isn't just the physical body.
Yeah, that is incredible. And I think I mentioned this maybe on one of Satyam's podcasts, but when I was going through my health crises back in 2011, specifically, I had this Tao Oracle deck, and there was a card in the deck, and the card was discipline. And it had a painting on the card of what I would assume would be like a Kung Fu master. And I had this beautiful Buddhist altar for a while, and I had that card of discipline up on my altar for almost 5 years to remind me each and every day of exactly what you're talking about. The discipline that it's not about a routine, it's different from that. And I liked what you said. I mean, your description of it is perfect because it's about disciplining. It's about using your senses and not just the physical senses, but the the sixth senses of these senses, and looking at subtle energy and understanding it, and really being mindful in every moment of every day. I mean, that to me is the discipline, is being present all the time. And that's not easy for any of us to do at all. But when you can do it, amazing things happen in those moments of mindfulness. It's just so amazing.
Yeah, and what I found is, even if we take this on the simplest way, it helps a person, and that's why I was able to work with a client from a doctor or a psychotherapist, because we can talk about it like you're talking, which is amazing, and not everyone can hear it that way. But that's what it's about. And in a sense, we won't survive if we don't do that. And
Yeah.
that basically means we won't thrive.
Yes. Yes.
I don't believe like everyone's, it's all going to end. It's not about that. At least I don't sense that. But it's, we're all, we can thrive in any situation if we practice and do that. Under any condition. Because even you read the stories of individuals who are in terrible suffering in World War II and World War I, and they thrived because that's what they did. So of course, many now, the whole world is faced with something, but we can still thrive.
Yes. Yes. Oh, David, I've just loved having you on today. I mean, really, I hope you come back on. I hope we can get you back on and talk some more. And I want to give you space here at the end to share, what's accessible to everyone. How can they connect with you? What's available to them so that they can continue to learn about you and what you have to offer.
Yeah, I mean, I have a very simple website, which everyone's welcome to if they want to contact me. I do see clients. I do have some group sessions, but I mainly work one-on-one. And I'm happy to help people all around the world now, so much online. I don't go to London so much now, but it works perfectly. And you can contact me. It's Mindfulness Programs, all lower, together, .org. Mindfulness Programs .org and mindfulnessprograms.org. And also my name, they can email me, would be David, and then Behrens, which is BEHRENS 108 at yahoo.com. Yeah, I'm very happy to support and help. I've dedicated my life for this, and I love, like yourself, I love what I do.
Yes. Well, I feel lucky to know you, and we as a community are lucky to be able to start our day. And for some of you guys who are, over water, you're probably ending part of your day or in the middle of your day, but to be able to connect with you today is just awesome. And you guys can catch David's awakening story on our upcoming documentary. It's going to be released on August 28th, Awakened Grace. And the full interviews will be available in September, and I'm working on information for that for you. I'll have all of David's information in the show notes as well. And if you're listening later on audio, his information is in the show notes there as well on iTunes and iHeartRadio and Spotify and Google Play. And you can also catch, David did an incredible presentation in our June One Heart, One Earth Global Healing Summit. And we just opened those summits today. Spirit really gave me a prompt yesterday to open all of the summits. There's 3 of them, 100 hours of content from now until September 11th. So for each and every one of you, it's free, it's accessible. David has an incredible presentation in the June Summit playlist, but all 3 playlists are open to all of you. So create a retreat for yourself and set aside time for your own awakening by watching a lot of those presentations. They're just so powerful. And David, thank you so much for being here. I just really, really just love and appreciate you, really. Thank you everybody for watching. Have an amazing day. And we will be back at 5:45 Mountain Time tonight with our Divine Masculine Roundtable. We have a retired NFL player. We have Satyam, who is a yoga instructor and lived in India for years. We actually have my husband, who's an aerospace engineer. We also have, let me think who else is on. We have Ted Morris, who works with trauma-informed care for men who are in recovery. We also have, let me think, I've got Ted, and then Donnie Dust, who is a survivalist and wrote books about his own journey of healing. They're all going to be together, you guys, at 5:45 to talk about the divine masculine and what it's like to be in a highly masculine environment and be able to come out of that and step into their spiritual practice. So that's going to be fun too, right, David? I'm excited for it. So thank you, David. Thank you, everybody. And yeah, having a wonderful day.
Bye-bye.